Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling something that's on everyone's mind, Canadian taxes. We've got this great guide here called Canadian Taxes, a comprehensive guide, and we're going to use it to demystify the whole thing.
Yeah, I think taxes can be scary for people, right?
Absolutely.
And this deep dive is all about understanding the system and using that knowledge, to your advantage.
I like that, cracking the code. Let's start with that whole progressive tax system thing. What's that all about?
Well, progressive basically means the more you earn, the higher percentage of your income goes to taxes. The goal is to fund those social programs and redistribute wealth. But of course, there are different viewpoints on how effective and fair that really
Oh,
is.
so it's not like a simple, Robin Hood situation. There's more to think about.
Right, exactly. It's a complex issue. The goal is a fairer society, but there's a lot of debate on whether it really works that way or, causes other problems instead. It's something worth looking into more deeply, for sure.
For sure. And this guide really digs into those details. Now, I'm curious about those deductions on our paychecks. It's like a little mystery every time.
Yes, payroll deductions. Two big ones are CPP and EI. Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance, we all have to contribute, but they're key for our social safety net.
Right. So CPP is like forced savings for retirement, and EI is there if you lose your job. But they do make my take-home pay look a bit sad sometimes.
That's true. You got to see the long-term benefit. But it can be a shock when you first start working. Luckily, there are tools like paycheck calculators that break down the deductions and show your real take-home pay.
Super helpful. Knowing where your money goes is like step one to taking control. The guide talks about all sorts of different taxes, though, not just income tax. It seems kind of a lot.
Yeah, it can seem overwhelming at first. We have income tax, payroll tax, sales taxes, property taxes, even a land transfer tax when you buy a house. And each province has its own rates and rules.
Hold on. A whole separate tax just for buying a house. That sounds intense. What's this land transfer tax all about?
It's basically a fee to the provincial government when you buy a property
Yeah.
based on the price. And it can be very different from province to province. Some cities like Toronto even add their own on top of the provincial one.
Yikes. So location really matters for taxes. You don't want to be surprised by that when you're house hunting.
Absolutely not. You have to know all the costs when making big financial decisions. And speaking of big financial events, let's talk about tax filing. It doesn't have to be a nightmare.
Yeah, that's the scary part, right? Tax season.
Not necessarily. You just need to know the deadlines and use the resources out there. Most Canadians file by April 30th. But if you're self-employed, you have until June 15th.
So entrepreneurs get a bit more time. Interesting. Yeah. But we're all dealing with the CRA, right? Which sounds intimidating.
Yes, the Canada Revenue Agency, or CRA, runs taxes in Canada, but they also have lots of resources to help taxpayers, understand their obligations. Don't think of them as the enemy.
Good to know. They're there to help not just punish you for lost receipts. The guide mentions some cool tools on their website, like calculators. Tell me more about those.
The CRA website has a ton of info, including those calculators. They have an income tax calculator, a payroll deductions calculator, even a tax return calculator to estimate what you owe or might get back.
Ooh, a refund calculator. Now we're talking. But how do you make sure you're getting the most out of that refund? Any secrets?
Not really secrets, but definitely smart moves you can make. Deductions are one of the best ways to lower your taxes and maybe boost that refund.
Deductions. Now we're getting somewhere. Tell me everything. How can we legally pay less tax and keep more of our money?
Well, there are several deductions Canadians can claim. Understanding those is key. Contributing to an RRSP, or Registered Retirement Savings Plan, is a big one. Those contributions reduce your taxable income, which lowers your tax bill.
So you save for retirement and pay less tax at the same time. Sign me up.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to build wealth long-term and pay less tax. There are other deductions to consider too, like childcare, medical expenses, even tuition credits.
Wow, more options than I thought.
Yeah.
So maximizing these means more cash in our pockets, right? But how do we know which ones apply to us and how to claim them?
That's where it can get tricky. Each deduction has its own rules, so it's important to learn the details and maybe talk to a professional if you need help.
Right. Sometimes it's better to leave it to the pros.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot, from that progressive tax system to those mysterious paycheck deductions and the power of deductions. Knowledge is power when it comes to finances, right?
Absolutely.
But before we get overwhelmed, let's summarize. What are the key things to remember?
First, use those calculators. They're free, easy, and give you a clearer picture. And that CRA website is a treasure trove of info. Don't be afraid to use it.
Right. Knowledge is power, but you got to have the tools to use it. What else?
We'll look into tax-sheltered accounts like RRSPs and TFSAs, tax-free savings accounts. Your investments grow tax-free in those, which can make a huge difference over time. We'll talk more about those in part 2, so stay tuned.
Great point. It's not just about today's taxes, it's about planning for the future. And speaking of planning, keep good records all year long. Receipts, invoices, medical bills, anything you might be able to deduct, just in case.
Absolutely. Being organized makes tax time way less stressful. And speaking of stress, file those taxes on time. Late filing means penalties and interest. No one wants that.
No kidding. Better safe than sorry. But what if it gets too complicated? Do we all need to become tax experts?
Not at all. If you have a simple situation, you can probably handle it yourself with the resources we talked about. But if you have more complex income, like from self-employment or investments, then it's often worth talking to a professional.
Makes sense. Sometimes it's better to leave it to the pros. Great advice. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive into Canadian taxes, what's your final thought for our listeners?
You know, Canadian taxes can seem complex, but understanding the basics gives you control. You have the power to make informed choices about your money and minimize how much tax you pay. So I encourage everyone to check out those resources, ask questions, and don't be afraid to get help when you need it.
I love that. It's not about being afraid of taxes, it's about understanding them and using that knowledge to your advantage.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn, and the more you know, the better you can handle Canadian taxes. What surprised you most about the system? What will you do differently with your finances now that you know more?
Great questions for everyone to think about. Stick with us for part 2, where we'll unpack even more about Canadian taxes. We'll be diving deeper into those tax-sheltered accounts like RRSPs and TFSAs, so don't miss it. If you like this deep dive and want to explore more topics like this, make sure to subscribe. We've got a whole library of deep dives just waiting for you.
You know, building on what we were talking about with deductions, one thing that confuses people is the difference between tax deductions and tax credits.
Oh yeah, I've always wondered about that. They sound similar, but I know they're not the same. Can you explain?
Sure. A tax deduction is like a discount on your taxable income, so it reduces the amount that's actually taxed. But a tax credit directly reduces the tax you owe.
So a deduction shrinks the pie before the government takes its slice. And a credit is like a smaller slice.
That's a great way to put it. Both can save you money, but they work differently. It's good to understand the difference so you can plan better.
That makes sense. And speaking of planning, let's get back to those tax-sheltered accounts you mentioned, RRSPs and TFSAs. We're diving deeper into those in this part, right? They sound like powerful tools for building wealth.
They are. Let's start with RRSPs, or Registered Retirement Savings Plans. As we said before, contributing to an RRSP lowers your taxable income for that year, so you might get a bigger refund or owe less tax. But the real benefit comes later.
Oh, what makes them so special?
The money you invest in an RRSP grows tax-free until you take it out in retirement, so it can grow much faster than in a regular account where you pay tax on the growth every year.
So it's like a double win. You save on taxes now, and your investments grow faster for the future.
Yeah.
No wonder people love RSPs.
Exactly. And since you only pay tax when you withdraw the money in retirement, and you're probably in a lower tax bracket, then it can save you a lot of money over your lifetime.
That's pretty cool. So RSPs are all about making your retirement savings more tax efficient. What about TFSAs? How do they work?
TFSAs, or tax-free savings accounts, are different. You don't get a tax deduction for contributing, but any growth inside the TFSA is totally tax-free, even when you take the money out.
So it's like a tax haven for your investments. No tax on the growth no matter what. That's amazing.
It is. TFSAs are super flexible, too. You can use them for anything, not just retirement, like a down payment on a house or long-term investments.
So RSPs are for retirement and TFSAs are for anything else. Both sound great. How do we know which one is right for us?
It depends on your situation, your goals, and how much risk you're comfortable with. There are some great websites that can help you compare RRSPs and TFSAs and figure out what's best for you.
Perfect. We'll link to those in the show notes for everyone. Now, we've been talking a lot about deductions and these special accounts, but let's not forget about staying organized throughout the year.
You got it. Keeping good records is so important for filing your taxes and getting all those deductions. I always suggest setting up a system to track your income and expenses. There are apps and websites that can help you stay on top of it all.
Much better than a shoebox full of receipts. A digital system sounds way more efficient.
Yeah.
Speaking of efficiency, let's talk deadlines. We know most people file by April 30th, but are there other important dates we should know about?
Yes, there are actually several tax deadlines throughout the year. Like if you're contributing to an RRSP, The deadline for the current tax year is the end of February. And if you're self-employed, as we said earlier, your tax deadline is June 15th.
So it's not just about April 30th. There's a whole tax calendar to keep track of. Any way to stay on top of all those dates?
The CRA website has a really useful tax calendar with all the important dates and deadlines. I suggest bookmarking it and checking it regularly.
Super helpful. We'll link to that too. Anything else people should keep in mind about staying organized and meeting those deadlines?
It's crucial to file your taxes on time, even if you can't pay everything you owe right away. Filing late can lead to big penalties and interest charges.
Ouch, procrastination is not our friend when it comes to taxes.
Definitely not. And the CRA is pretty understanding about payment plans. If you're having trouble paying about it, reach out to them and explain your situation. They'll often work with you to set up a payment schedule you can manage.
That's good to know. They're there to help, not just punish us.
Exactly. They know that things happen, and sometimes you just can't pay everything right away. They'd rather help you figure it out than hit you with penalties.
So communication is key. If you're struggling, talk to the CRA. Now, we've talked about doing your taxes yourself, but what about when things get really complicated? When should you call in a professional?
If your taxes are pretty straightforward, like just employment income and maybe some basic investments, you can probably do it yourself with the resources we've talked about. But if your income is more complex, like if you're self-employed or have rental properties or lots of investments, it's usually a good idea to talk to a tax expert.
I get it. Sometimes you need someone with more experience to handle those tricky situations.
Exactly. A good tax professional can help you save money on taxes. Make sure you're claiming everything you can and give you peace of mind knowing that everything is done right.
Like having a financial guardian angel. Now, as we wrap up this part of our Canadian tax journey, what's the main message you want people to take away?
I think the most important thing is that knowledge is power when it comes to Canadian taxes. By understanding how it works, using the resources out there, and planning ahead, you can pay less tax and be better off financially.
I love that. It's not about being afraid of taxes. It's about understanding them and using that knowledge to your advantage.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's always more to learn, and the more you know, the better prepared you'll be for the world of Canadian taxes. Join us for part 3, where we'll finish up our exploration of Canadian taxes and give you some final tips to help you on your financial journey.
Welcome back for the final part of our Canadian tax deep dive. I'm feeling a lot more confident about my finances already after all this.
That's great to hear. Yeah, a little knowledge can go a long way, right? Especially with something like taxes.
For sure. Now, we've covered a lot of the technical stuff,
Yeah.
deductions, credits, those tax-sheltered accounts. But what about the mental side of it? Taxes stress people out. Any tips for staying calm during tax season?
That's so important. Taxes can be really emotional, especially if you owe a lot or feel overwhelmed. I think the best thing is to be proactive. Don't wait till the last minute. Start gathering your stuff early, get familiar with the rules, and break it down into smaller steps.
Good advice. Just like anything else, the more prepared you are, the less stressful it is.
Exactly. And remember, you don't have to do it all alone. If you're feeling lost, reach out to a tax pro. They can help you figure it all out and take some of that stress away.
Sometimes peace of mind is worth it, especially with your money.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of money, I was wondering about something. The guide mentions that even how you invest can affect your taxes. Is that right?
Absolutely. Different investments have different tax implications. Some investments give you interest income, which is taxed at your normal rate. Others, like dividends from Canadian companies, get a special tax break called the dividend tax credit. And then there are capital gains. When you sell an investment for a profit, you only pay tax on part of that profit.
Wow. So you have to think about taxes when you're choosing investments too.
You do. It's not just about making the most money, it's about keeping the most money after taxes. That's why it's important to think about the tax side of things and maybe talk to a financial advisor who understands all that.
Another piece of the puzzle. Okay, well, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's your final bit of wisdom for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power with Canadian taxes. When you understand the system, use the resources available, and plan ahead, you can really minimize your taxes and improve your financial situation.
I love that. It's not about fearing taxes, it's about understanding them and making them work for you.
Exactly. And remember, this is just a starting point. Keep learning the job, keep asking questions, and you'll be in great shape.
So true. The more you know, the better. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into Canadian taxes. I hope everyone feels more confident and ready to take control of their finances.
Me too. It's all about empowering yourselves to make smart financial decisions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And if you enjoyed this deep dive and you're hungry for more insightful content on topics that matter to you, be sure to subscribe. We've got tons of other deep dives just waiting for you. Thanks for joining us.